October 9th, 1983, Rangoon, Burma. 10:27 a.m. South Korean Foreign Minister Lee Bum-suk stood before the Martyrs' Mausoleum, adjusting his collar in the humid morning air. The white colonial-era shrine rose before him, its graceful arches and columns a monument to Burma's independence hero Aung San and his assassinated cabinet members. In 17 minutes, President Chun Doo-hwan would arrive for a wreath-laying ceremony. Lee had come early, as protocol demanded, to ensure everything was perfect for the presidential visit. Behind the shrine's ornate roof, nestled among the decorative molding, 3 North Korean commandos had spent the previous night installing remotely detonated bombs. Major Zin Mo, Captain Kim Jin-soo, and Captain Kang Min-chul of the Reconnaissance Bureau's 695th Unit had rehearsed this moment for months. They watched through binoculars from a safe house 800 meters away, their detonator ready, waiting for the unmistakable figure of South Korea's president to step into the kill zone. Lee heard the ceremonial music begin. The Burmese honor guard snapped to attention. He glanced at his watch, 10:30 a.m. The presidential motorcade was running late, stuck in Rangoon's chaotic traffic. No matter. Lee would wait. He stepped closer to the shrine, admiring the flowers arranged for the ceremony, completely unaware that he was standing exactly where the North Koreans expected President Chun to be standing at this precise moment. 800 meters away, Major Zin Mo saw the South Korean officials gathering. He saw the honor guard. He saw what looked like the beginning of the ceremony. Unable to see faces clearly through the tropical haze, relying on timing and position, he made a decision. He pressed the detonator. The explosion that followed would kill 21 people, trigger an international crisis, and reveal the brutal lengths to which North Korea would go to decapitate its southern rival's leadership. But it would miss its primary target entirely, because President Chun Doo-hwan was still stuck in traffic, running just late enough to survive the most audacious assassination attempt of the Cold War's Asian theater. In Pyongyang, the plan had seemed flawless. Kim Jong-il, the supreme leader's son and heir apparent who controlled North Korea's intelligence apparatus, had personally approved Operation Rainbow. The logic was simple, and from North Korea's perspective, strategically sound. Eliminate South Korea's military leadership in a single stroke, trigger political chaos in Seoul, and create an opportunity for regime collapse or even reunification under Northern terms. The South Korean puppet regime is a house of cards, Kim Jong-il told his Reconnaissance Bureau commanders in early 1983. Remove Chun Doo-hwan and his military clique, and the structure collapses. The Korean people will rise up and demand reunification. This wasn't mere rhetoric. It reflected genuine North Korean assessment of South Korea's political fragility following Chun's 1979 military coup and the Gwangju uprising he had brutally suppressed in 1980. The choice of Rangoon as the assassination venue reflected sophisticated strategic thinking. Burma was officially non-aligned, maintaining diplomatic relations with both Koreas. A successful attack there could be attributed to dissident elements, creating deniability. More importantly, South Korean presidents rarely traveled abroad, making this state visit a rare opportunity. When Chun's Burma trip was announced in August 1983, the Reconnaissance Bureau had just 8 weeks to plan and execute the most complex overseas operation in North Korean history. We're not talking about poisoning someone's tea or a simple shooting, recalled a defected North Korean intelligence officer years later. This was a military operation on foreign soil, requiring infiltration, surveillance, bomb placement, and exfiltration, all without detection by Burmese, South Korean, or Western intelligence. The confidence level in Pyongyang was extraordinarily high. North Korea's special forces were considered elite, their operatives fanatical and well-trained. In Seoul, President Chun Doo-hwan viewed the Burma trip as a diplomatic triumph. Since seizing power in his 1979 coup, Chun had faced international isolation and domestic opposition. The invitation from Burmese President Woo San-yu offered legitimacy and an opportunity to strengthen ties with the non-aligned movement. This visit demonstrates that the Republic of Korea is a respected member of the international community. Chun announced before departure, "Not the pariah that our enemies claim." South Korean intelligence had detected increased North Korean activity, but nothing specific pointing to Burma. "We were tracking dozens of potential threats," admitted a former KCIA officer. North Korea had attempted infiltrations, tunnels under the DMZ, assassination teams sent south. Burma seemed like one of the safer destinations, a friendly, neutral country far from the peninsula. The security detail accompanying Chun was substantial, but not overwhelming. No one imagined North Korea would risk an international incident of this magnitude on Burmese soil. The Americans, monitoring Cold War tensions in Asia, saw the Burma visit through the lens of regional stability. By 1983, U.S. attention was focused on Central America, the Middle East, and the accelerating arms race with the Soviet Union. Korea had been quiet since the armistice 30 years earlier. "We assessed North Korea as bellicose but rational," noted a former CIA analyst. "They'd tested boundaries with tunnels and infiltrations, but nothing approaching a decapitation strike against Allied leadership on neutral territory. That crossed so many red lines, diplomatic, military, international law, that it seemed beyond even Pyongyang's risk tolerance." The Soviets, North Korea's primary backer, knew nothing of the operation. Kim Il-sung had learned to keep Moscow at arm's length, particularly for operations that might embarrass or implicate the USSR. "The North Koreans operated with disturbing independence," recalled a former Soviet diplomat in Pyongyang. "They'd inform us after the fact, or not at all. This made them dangerous, unpredictable clients who could trigger crises we'd have to manage." The Rangoon bombing emerged from North Korea's desperate strategic position in the early 1980s. For 3 decades, North Korea had competed with South Korea for legitimacy, prosperity, and international recognition. By 1983, that competition was being decisively lost. South Korea's economy was booming. The Miracle on the Han River had transformed a war-devastated agricultural society into an industrial powerhouse. Seoul's GDP was growing at 8 to 10% annually. North Korea's economy, by contrast, was stagnating under the weight of military spending and central planning inefficiencies. More galling to Pyongyang was the diplomatic shift. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, North Korea had won recognition from dozens of non-aligned and communist states. But by the early 1980s, South Korea's economic success and diplomatic outreach were reversing those gains. When Burma, a traditionally friendly nation, invited Chun Doo-hwan for a state visit, it represented another blow to northern prestige. Kim Il-sung, the aging great leader, faced succession pressures. His son Kim Jong-il, designated heir since 1974, needed to prove his credentials. Control of intelligence and special operations became Kim Jong-il's power base. The Reconnaissance Bureau, North Korea's primary foreign intelligence service, reported directly to him. Kim Jong-il was building his legitimacy through aggressive action, explained a scholar of North Korean leadership dynamics. He needed victories, symbolic or real, that demonstrated strength and revolutionary commitment. The Reconnaissance Bureau's 695th Unit, selected for the Rangoon operation, represented North Korea's elite. Officially designated as a liaison office, it conducted overseas operations including assassinations, kidnappings, and sabotage. Its operatives underwent years of training in explosives, weapons, languages, and deep-cover tradecraft. These weren't suicide bombers or fanatics, noted a South Korean intelligence official. They were professional soldiers expected to complete missions and return home as heroes. Major Zin Mo, the operations commander, had operated overseas for a decade. He spoke fluent Chinese and adequate English, had traveled in Southeast Asia under various covers, and had successfully completed several minor operations. Captain Kim Jin-soo specialized in explosives and had trained with East German Stasi advisors. Captain Kang Min-chul handled communications and logistics. All three were Communist Party members from elite families, trusted, ideologically reliable, and expendable if necessary. Planning began immediately after Chun's visit was announced in August. North Korean agents in Burma, operating under diplomatic cover in the embassy and as journalists and businessmen, began surveillance of likely venues. The Martyrs Mausoleum was identified quickly. It was the mandatory first stop for all visiting heads of state, a ceremonial requirement that created a predictable target. The shrine was perfect, explained a demolitions expert analyzing the attack years later. Fixed location, known timing, structural features that could hide explosives, and ceremonial protocols that would cluster the target group together. The three-man team infiltrated Burma separately in September, traveling on forged Chinese and Thai passports. They established a safe house, acquired explosives through the North Korean embassy's diplomatic pouch, which Burmese customs didn't inspect, and conducted detailed reconnaissance. Over 3 weeks, they photographed the mausoleum from every angle, timed the morning light, studied security patterns, and identified the optimal bomb placement. The explosives themselves were Soviet-designed RDX compound, powerful and stable. The team fabricated 3 devices, each containing roughly 10 kilograms of explosive with electrical detonators. The remote triggering system used commercial radio equipment modified to ensure reliability at 800 meters. They tested everything multiple times, revealed interrogation transcripts later. They dry ran the detonation sequence, verified line of sight, practiced their exfiltration route. On the night of October 8-9, the team accessed the mausoleum. How they bypassed security remains disputed, likely through bribery of a local guard or exploitation of lax overnight security. Working by flashlight, they installed the 3 bombs in the roof structure directly above where the wreath-laying ceremony would occur. The charges were positioned to create a focused downward blast that would collapse the roof and the facade, maximizing casualties in the kill zone below. The escape plan was straightforward. After detonation, the team would destroy the detonator, proceed separately to the North Korean embassy, and exfiltrate via diplomatic channels or, if necessary, overland through the Thai border. They expected to be heroes, noted a defector familiar with the operation. Medals, promotions, personal congratulations from Kim Il-sung himself. This wasn't a suicide mission. It was a career-making operation. October 9th, 1983, 10:25 a.m. The presidential motorcade crept through Rangoon's morning traffic. Inside the lead vehicle, President Chun Doo-hwan reviewed his speaking notes for the wreath-laying ceremony. His foreign minister, Lee Bum-suk, had already arrived at the mausoleum. Vice President Lee Ki-baek, Economic Planning Minister Soo Suk-jun, Foreign Affairs Minister Lee Bum-suk, and 12 other senior officials waited at the shrine. The Burmese honor guard stood ready. The ceremony was supposed to begin at 10:30 a.m. sharp. At 10:27 a.m., Foreign Minister Lee Bum-suk stepped forward to inspect the floral arrangements one final time. He stood directly beneath the hidden bombs, precisely where protocol dictated the president would stand in 3 minutes. The morning sun broke through the haze, illuminating the shrine's white columns. 800 meters away, Major Zin Mo watched through binoculars. He saw South Korean officials in dark suits gathering before the shrine. He saw the honor guard at attention. He saw what appeared to be the ceremony beginning. The tropical haze, the distance, the identical dark suits worn by South Korean officials, all created fatal ambiguity. Were those figures the advance party or the main delegation? Was that movement the ceremony starting or just preparation? Zin Mo faced a decision. Wait for absolute confirmation of Chun's presence, risking that the president might not enter the optimal kill zone, or detonate now while senior officials were clearly present. He had been trained to be aggressive, to seize opportunities, to trust his operational instincts. The ceremony seemed to be starting. He pressed the detonator. At 10:27:03 a.m., 3 bombs exploded simultaneously. The blast wave hit Foreign Minister Lee Bum-suk first, killing him instantly. The roof structure collapsed, sending ornamental molding, chunks of concrete, and shrapnel downward in a focused cone of destruction. Ambassador Lee Bum-suk, Economic Planning Minister Su Suk-jun, Commerce Minister Kim Dong-wi, Energy Minister Su Sang-chul, and Deputy Prime Minister Su Suk-jun died within seconds. The Burmese honor guard, 18 soldiers, were cut down by shrapnel and collapsing masonry. The sound reached the presidential motorcade 1 second later, a deep, rolling thunder that rattled windows and stopped traffic. The ground shook, recalled Chun's bodyguard. Immediately, we knew it was an explosion. Massive, close. Then we saw the smoke rising from exactly where we were supposed to be. Chun's security chief grabbed the president. Down! Get down! The motorcade stopped. Bodyguards surrounded the presidential vehicle, weapons drawn, scanning for secondary attacks. Radio communications erupted with confused, overlapping transmissions. Explosion at the Mausoleum. Casualties. Repeat, explosion at the target site. President's status. President is secure, not at location. At the Mausoleum, the scene was apocalyptic. The shrine's elegant facade had collapsed into a pile of rubble and twisted metal. Bodies lay everywhere, some killed instantly, others torn by shrapnel, crushed by debris, or bleeding from catastrophic wounds. Survivors staggered through the dust and smoke, ears bleeding from blast overpressure, calling for help in Korean and Burmese. Ambassador to Burma Cho Tai-hyung, thrown 15 feet by the blast, struggled to his feet. Half his delegation was dead or dying. The honor guard had been annihilated. Burmese civilians caught near the blast zone lay in the street. I thought it was war, Cho recalled. I thought North Korea had invaded, that this was the opening attack of World War III. Within minutes, Burmese security forces swarmed the scene. Ambulances arrived, overwhelmed by casualties. The dead were everywhere. 21 ultimately, with 46 wounded, many critically. The precision of the blast left no doubt. This wasn't an accident. Someone had planted powerful explosives with military precision, targeting the ceremony with lethal intent. President Chun, still in his motorcade 2 miles away, received confirmation. His entire senior cabinet had been at the shrine. Most were dead or wounded. If he had been on time, if traffic had been lighter, if protocol had been followed exactly, he would be dead. I felt rage, Chun said later. Absolute rage at whoever did this, and profound guilt that I had survived while my ministers had not. The North Korean team, watching from their safe house, realized immediately something had gone catastrophically wrong. The explosion had occurred perfectly. They'd seen the blast, the collapsing roof, the chaos. But within minutes, Burmese radio reported that President Chun was alive, unharmed, never at the Mausoleum. We killed everyone except the target, Captain Kim Jin-soo said during interrogation. Our mission was a complete failure. Worse, Burmese security had sealed the city within an hour. Roadblocks appeared on every major route. The airport was closed. The North Korean embassy came under immediate surveillance. The plan to exfiltrate via diplomatic channels was suddenly unworkable. Any North Korean departures would trigger immediate suspicion and arrest. By noon, the three operatives had destroyed their detonator and buried their equipment. They had false documents and money. But they were trapped in a city now swarming with security forces, hunting for whoever had just committed the worst terrorist attack in Burmese history. Their training had covered many contingencies, but not this. A successful bombing with the wrong victims and no escape route. For 72 hours, they hid in their safe house, listening to radio reports describing the carnage, the international outrage, the Burmese government's vow to find the perpetrators. Food ran low, their nerves frayed. Then, on October 12th, Burmese police, acting on tips from locals who'd noticed suspicious foreigners, raided the safe house. Captain Kang Min-chul detonated a grenade, killing himself and wounding several police officers. Major Zin Mo and Captain Kim Jin-soo were captured alive after a brief firefight. The Rangoon bombing's immediate aftermath triggered the worst crisis in North-South Korean relations since the Korean War armistice. In Seoul, President Chun, shaken but alive, addressed the nation on October 10th. This barbaric act of terrorism, he declared, demonstrates the criminal nature of the North Korean communist regime. They have murdered our finest public servants in cold blood on neutral soil. This cannot stand unanswered. South Korean military forces went to their highest alert level since 1953. Combat aircraft patrolled the DMZ. Artillery units assumed firing positions. Special forces prepared for retaliatory raids into North Korea. For 48 hours, we were closer to renewed Korean War than at any point in 30 years, recalled a U.S. military advisor stationed in Seoul. Chun wanted revenge. His generals wanted blood. We had to physically restrain them from launching immediate strikes. The Reagan administration, informed within hours of the attack, faced a nightmare scenario. America's Mutual Defense Treaty with South Korea technically applied only to attacks on South Korean territory, not terrorism in third countries. But Chun was demanding support for retaliation, and Washington couldn't appear to abandon an ally after such a brazen attack. We spent October 10-15 in continuous crisis management, recalled a National Security Council staffer. Do we support South Korean retaliation and risk wider war? Do we restrain them and look weak? Do we pursue diplomatic solutions that might look inadequate? President Reagan called Chun personally on October 10th. Mr. President, America stands with you completely, Reagan said. But we must be strategic in our response. North Korea wants you to overreact, wants to trigger a war. We'll make them pay, but on our terms, not theirs. Reagan ordered the aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson to Korean waters, deployed additional fighter squadrons to South Korean bases, and authorized intelligence sharing for potential retaliatory operations. But he also insisted on restraint, buying time for diplomatic pressure to work. Secretary of State George Shultz began working the international community. The evidence was overwhelming. Captured North Korean operatives, explosives traced to North Korean sources, clear operational planning from Pyongyang. But getting international condemnation required careful diplomacy. The Soviet Union, Burma's neighbor China, and non-aligned nations had to be convinced that North Korea had crossed fundamental red lines. Burma's response was swift and decisive. President Yoon Suk-yeol, mortified that his country had been used for such an attack, immediately severed diplomatic relations with North Korea on October 9th, the fastest diplomatic rupture in Burmese history. This despicable act of terrorism on Burmese soil, Yoon Suk-yeol announced, is an intolerable violation of our sovereignty and international law. The perpetrators and those who sent them will face justice. The trials of Major Zin Mo and Captain Kim Jin-soo became international sensations. Under interrogation, both men admitted their North Korean military identities, confirmed orders from Pyongyang, and detailed the operation's planning. They were professionals, noted a Burmese investigator. They didn't crumble under questioning. But they also understood they were abandoned. North Korea denied everything, called them rogue elements, left them to die in Burmese custody. On December 9, 1983, Burma convicted both men of murder and terrorism. The death sentences were carried out by hanging in May 1984. Their final statements, recorded by Burmese authorities, showed no remorse. "We are soldiers of the Korean Revolution," Zinmo said before execution. "We regret only that we failed to complete our mission." North Korea's international denial campaign collapsed within days. The evidence was irrefutable. The United Nations issued a resolution condemning the attack. The non-aligned movement, traditionally sympathetic to North Korea, distanced itself. Most devastatingly, China, North Korea's primary benefactor, delivered a private rebuke to Pyongyang. "You have embarrassed us," Chinese Foreign Minister Wu Shueqian told North Korean diplomats. "This kind of adventurism threatens regional stability and our own interests." The Soviet Union, already uneasy about North Korean independence, was furious. "We learned about Rangoon from news reports," recalled a Soviet diplomat in Pyongyang. "No warning, no consultation, and suddenly we're expected to defend this insanity at the UN?" Moscow told Pyongyang clearly, "No more foreign adventures without our approval." Soviet military aid to North Korea was temporarily suspended, a clear signal of displeasure. In Pyongyang, Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il faced rare internal criticism. The operation had failed catastrophically, killed the wrong people, created an international crisis, and strengthened the South Korean government rather than weakening it. There were no purges of the operation's planners, noted a defector familiar with leadership dynamics. That would have meant admitting failure. Instead, they doubled down on denial and blamed rogue elements within the Reconnaissance Bureau who'd exceeded their authority. South Korea leveraged the bombing brilliantly in international forums. North Korea has shown its true face, South Korean diplomats argued. Not a legitimate state, but a terrorist organization with UN membership. The attack strengthened South Korea's position in the Cold War's Asian theater, won sympathy from previously neutral nations, and isolated Pyongyang diplomatically for years. The United States used Rangoon to justify enhanced intelligence cooperation with South Korea and Japan. CIA and NSA resources were redirected to North Korean monitoring. Special Operations Forces conducted training exercises specifically designed to counter North Korean commando units. After Rangoon, we stopped treating North Korea as a conventional military threat and started treating them as a terrorist state, explained a U.S. intelligence analyst. Domestically in South Korea, the bombing had unintended consequences. Chun's government, previously facing opposition over its authoritarian nature and the Gwangju massacre, received a surge of public support. Chun became a symbol of survival and defiance, noted a South Korean journalist. The opposition couldn't criticize a president who'd just survived an assassination attempt. Rangoon gave Chun political breathing room he desperately needed. The bombing's psychological impact on Korean politics was profound. South Korean leaders traveled abroad less frequently. Security protocols became paranoid. Every state visit, every international meeting, every ceremonial event became a potential death trap requiring massive security. Rangoon taught us that North Korea would try anything, anywhere, anytime, recalled a former presidential security officer. We could never relax again. North Korean behavior evolved too, but not toward restraint. If anything, Rangoon's failure convinced Pyongyang to try different tactics. In 1987, North Korean agents bombed Korean Air Flight 858, killing all 115 people aboard in another attempt to destabilize South Korea. In 2010, North Korea torpedoed the South Korean warship Cheonan, killing 46 sailors. The pattern of provocations, denials, and escalations that began with Rangoon has continued for 40 years. The Rangoon bombing reached its peak impact not in the explosion itself, but in the week that followed, when the world realized how close Asia had come to renewed war. Between October 10-17, 1983, South Korea mobilized for conflict, while North Korea braced for retaliation. American forces in Korea went to DEFCON 3. The DMZ became a tinderbox, where a single miscalculation could trigger catastrophe. We had units with live ammunition, rules of engagement that authorized immediate response to provocations, and a South Korean president demanding we support retaliatory strikes, recalled General John Wickham, U.S. commander in Korea. Meanwhile, North Korea was claiming innocence, while mobilizing its own forces defensively. Both sides were coiled springs. Any incident, a border shooting, a plane straying over the DMZ, a misinterpreted radar contact, could have started World War III's Asian theater. The crisis's resolution came through a combination of American restraint, Soviet pressure on North Korea, and Chun's ultimate decision to pursue justice over revenge. On October 15th, Chun announced that South Korea would not launch immediate military retaliation, but would instead pursue complete international isolation of the terrorist regime in Pyongyang. It was a strategic choice that prioritized long-term pressure over immediate satisfaction. The human cost was staggering and permanent. 21 people died. 17 South Koreans, including 4 cabinet ministers, 4 presidential advisors, and 2 journalists, and 4 Burmese, including the honor guard. 46 more were wounded, many with life-altering injuries. The dead included some of South Korea's most promising leaders, ministers who might have become presidents, diplomats who might have achieved breakthroughs, visionaries who might have shaped reunification. The bombing didn't just kill individuals, reflected a South Korean historian. It killed possibilities. It ended careers, destroyed families, and demonstrated that North Korea would murder dozens of innocents to kill one man. That revelation, that Pyongyang's brutality had no boundaries, changed how the world saw the North Korean regime. For Burma, the attack was a national trauma. The country's carefully maintained neutrality had been violated. Its sovereignty had been treated with contempt. The massacre of the Burmese honor guard, young soldiers performing a ceremonial duty, enraged the public. Burma's diplomatic rupture with North Korea lasted until 2007, a 24-year freeze that demonstrated lasting consequences for state-sponsored terrorism. The bombing also revealed uncomfortable truths about Cold War proxy conflicts. North Korea had calculated, correctly, that it could attempt such an operation without Soviet intervention or approval. This independence made Pyongyang dangerous in ways that Soviet client states were not. Moscow could control East Germany, Poland, even Cuba to some extent, noted a Cold War historian. But North Korea was a rogue ally, pursuing its own agenda regardless of broader communist bloc interests. International law implications were profound but frustrating. North Korea's denials, despite overwhelming evidence, demonstrated the limitations of international justice. The captured operatives were tried and executed, but the men who ordered the attack, Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, faced no consequences beyond diplomatic isolation. "We proved North Korea did it," said a South Korean prosecutor. "We had confessions, evidence, witnesses. But the actual masterminds were untouchable, protected by sovereignty and China's security guarantees." The bombing influenced South Korean politics for decades. every subsequent president has traveled with extraordinary security. Intelligence services maintain extensive networks monitoring North Korean activities worldwide. The attack validated the hardline position that North Korea could never be trusted, undermining moderate voices who advocated engagement. Rangoon killed the possibility of meaningful détente for a generation, argued a former South Korean diplomat. How do you negotiate with a regime that tried to blow up your entire government? For Kim Jong-il personally, the bombing's failure created a complicated legacy. He had ordered a bold operation that failed spectacularly, yet faced no serious internal consequences. The lesson learned wasn't restraint, but rather the need for better intelligence and planning. When Kim Jong-il assumed full power after his father's death in 1994, he continued the pattern of provocations, albeit with more sophisticated methods. The operation's failure also demonstrated North Korea's intelligence limitations. The inability to confirm Chun's presence before detonation, the failure to establish proper exfiltration, the lack of contingency planning, all revealed an intelligence service more focused on aggressive action than operational excellence. They were bold but sloppy, assessed a CIA officer, willing to take enormous risks but lacking the sophistication to manage those risks properly. The Rangoon bombing occupies a unique position in Cold War history. Not a superpower confrontation, but a proxy state's unilateral action that nearly triggered regional war. It demonstrated that by 1983, the Cold War's most dangerous flashpoints weren't in Europe or the Middle East, but in Asia, where North Korea operated with alarming independence from its communist sponsors. The attack's failure achieved the opposite of its intent. Rather than destabilizing South Korea, it strengthened Chun's government. Rather than isolating Seoul diplomatically, it isolated Pyongyang. Rather than demonstrating North Korean power, it revealed desperation. Rangoon was the act of a regime that knew it was losing, argued historian Don Oberdorfer. Economically, diplomatically, ideologically, North Korea was being outcompeted by the South. The bombing was a frustrated lashing out by a state with few remaining options. Post-Cold War revelations, Parispewareñas from defectors and declassified materials confirmed what was suspected. Kim Jong-il personally ordered the operation and selected the target. No rogue elements, no unauthorized operation. This was a deliberate decision by North Korea's leadership to attempt assassination of an allied head of state on neutral territory. The boldness was remarkable. The recklessness was shocking even by Cold War standards. The bombing established patterns that continue today. North Korea's strategy of provocations, military and terrorist, followed by denials and demands for concessions, became standard. Rangoon was followed by the 1987 Korean air bombing, the 1996 submarine infiltration, the 2010 Cheonan sinking, and dozens of smaller incidents. The playbook written in 1983 remains in use 40 years later. For those who survived, President Chun, bodyguards, diplomats who arrived minutes late, October 9, 1983, became a defining moment. I think about it every day, Chun said in a 1990 interview. Why did traffic save my life? Why did my ministers die in my place? These questions have no answers, only the haunting reality that fate turned on minutes and miles. The Martyrs' Mausoleum was rebuilt and reopened in 1984. Today, visitors can see a memorial plaque listing the victims, South Korean and Burmese names side by side, united in death by North Korean violence. The shrine, built to honor Burmese who died fighting for independence, became a monument to Cold War victims of state terrorism. The fundamental lesson of Rangoon is that in the Cold War's final decade, proxy states had become dangerous in new ways. No longer simply pawns of superpowers, nations like North Korea pursued independent agendas that threatened regional and potentially global stability. The bombing revealed that détente between Washington and Moscow didn't guarantee peace, not when clients could act unilaterally with devastating consequences. October 9, 1983, stands as a reminder that the Cold War's human cost wasn't only measured in nuclear arsenals or proxy wars, but in moments like these. A shrine in Rangoon, a president running late, bombs hidden in decorative molding, and 21 people dead because North Korea gambled on assassination and murdered the wrong victims. The explosion failed to achieve its objective, but succeeded in demonstrating that Cold War desperation could make any place, any moment, a battlefield. In the end, Major Zin Mo was wrong about one thing. Standing beneath the gallows in May 1984, he claimed his only regret was failing to complete the mission. But the real failure was deeper. The operation revealed North Korea not as a revolutionary vanguard, but as a terrorist state, isolated and desperate, capable of mass murder, but incapable of achieving its objectives. That revelation, more than any bomb, shaped Korea's next 40 years.